I wanted to become a Spartan for a day, as they were known for being fearless warriors trained from childhood in a brutal regime of physical and mental conditioning, and I love a challenge. But they're also known for some brutal battles wiping out territories and civilizations, something I of course can't do. However, there is one thing I can do. So a Spartan race is an off-road race consisting of 20 obstacles, with the first one being the over and under walls. You have to go over the first one, then you have to go under the second one, and finally you have to go through the last one. Unfortunately, I hit my back, but it didn't really matter. I kept having to run. And run we did. We ran through forests, up gradual hills, until we got to obstacle 2, the 8-foot wall climb. After obstacle 2, there was a short sprint to third obstacle, which was the vertical cargo climb. You had to jump up onto a platform, then climb over this vertical wall, making sure that you didn't fall off or your foot didn't go through the net. Unfortunately, I managed to do it successfully. After that, there was quite a few uphill runs, running on uneven surfaces, straight down a hill, until eventually we reached the 4th obstacle, which unfortunately I didn't film, and it was the hurdles. After that was obstacle number 5, the barbed wire crawl. Now this one I can imagine on a nice wet day, it would be nice on the shoulders and the knees, but unfortunately where it was so dry it just cut up my elbows, and I even got a stick in my elbow, but I kept having to keep pushing. I walked up that next hill because it was so brutal. It was the steepest hill I've ever been up, but I kept having to run, and eventually I got a stitch, as you can see by my face. Obstacle 6 was then rolling mud mound, with a pool of muddy water in the middle. You sludged your way through until eventually you reached the other side and had to climb up the slippy mud hill. This was the first sign of mud, and it wasn't the last, because after a nice short run, there was obstacle 7, dunking walls. There was cold water, and you had to dunk under these inflatable walls over the top. 2 dunks to be precise. I came out the other side and I was excited. The reason I was excited because I could see my mate up ahead. All I had to do was get over obstacle 8, the slip walls. I grabbed over the rope, and the hardest bit of this was climbing over the top. But once I got down, I started sprinting, until I eventually reached obstacle 9, the bucket carry. I'm not too sure how heavy these buckets were, but it was difficult. I held it on one shoulder and kept swapping every now and then, walking up this hill, back down, until I could see my mate in the distance, and he was waiting for obstacle number 10, the Hercules hoist. This bag was approximately 80 kilograms, and it was impossible to get up. I just about got it to the top, slowly lowered it, continued the bucket carry until I could place it down at the end, and then did a full sprint. Now what are we sprinting for, you may ask? The refreshment station. This was the only one around the obstacle course, but the longer distances have multiple. We were doing the shortest one this time. After a quick guzzle of water, I kept running until I reached another carry, the sandbag carry. These bags were 60 pounds, which I think is about 25 kilograms, but uphill was pretty tough. And to make matters even worse, obstacle 12 was in the middle of the sandbag carry, being the cargo net crawl. Everybody was crawling through carrying it, but I just picked it up, turned backwards and walked backwards through the net. It worked out well until I got stuck towards the end, but after a bit of untangling myself, I managed to get out the other side and started to walk again. After walking uphill, of course, there's a downhill, so I started running. Unfortunately, I gained a bit too much momentum, ran straight past my other friend and kept going until I reached the end. I then placed the sandbag down, and the run continued. By this point I was pretty tired, as you can imagine. I'm over halfway through, but the next second half was going to be tough, because obstacle number 13 was the Atlas carry. These stones were ridiculously heavy, but I worked out a nice way of picking them up, so I trudged my way to the end. I think the distance was about 25 metres, so there and back were 50 metres, but I'm quite weak, so this was very tough. And even the strong people were having trouble with it. So I started giving some tips, and I was trying to tell them to roll it up onto their quad first before trying to shift it over and pick it up. But I kept having to run. At the end of the day, it's a race, and I was running that race. So we had the rope climb next, obstacle number 14. For some reason, I was naturally good at this, although I've never done it before. Once you get to the top, you have to ring the bell. Anyway, here's a third person view of someone else doing it. Nice. Then about 50 meters ahead of that, there was obstacle number 15. The multi-rig. This was like rings on ropes and then a pole you had to go across. Bit like Ninja Warrior. With my gangly arms, I managed to swing my way through it, getting to the end and smacking that bell. And I had to run to the next one, the inverted wall, obstacle number 16. Once we were over there, it was a bit precarious getting down the other side. Gained a bit of speed, it's like a slide, but fortunately there's crash mats at the bottom to catch you. We were almost towards the end. Just had to keep trudging through, looking like I was running in GTA. But up next was the spear throw. Now this one was practically impossible. I mean, it didn't help that my target was laying down sideways, but I got 3 attempts and unfortunately failed all of them. When you fail one, there's a thing called the penalty loop. You have to run an extra loop on top of what you had already run as a punishment. Some Spartan races have burpees or sit-ups or push-ups, but our one was a penalty loop. Next up, monkey bars, obstacle 18. Again, my gangly arms helped with this, although I didn't realise the ladders we were climbing on tilted when you got to the end of them, and that was quite tough. But the final sprint then followed. All that was left was obstacle number 19, an A-frame cargo climb. Again, trying to make sure your feet didn't fall through the middle, trying to make sure you didn't knock anybody off. I got to the top, quickly transitioned over, climbed my way down, and I was almost ready for the final sprint. The final sprint to finish. I opened up my strides, jumped over the fire, and went across the finish line. Mate, look at that. Look at that. Oh yeah, also, the race was technically 5k, but on my mate's watch it said we did 8.8. I was lied to.